so let's get into it. Dawn of Battle, designed by Mike Nagel. Of course, if you go to Wargame HQ, you're going to see that I love this guy's designs, especially flying colors. So, Dawn of Battle was a Kickstarter game that Worthington put out, and had some kind of cool things going on for it. So, it is a Ancient Battles kind of sandbox. It covers everything from, they say on here, from 1500 BCE to 1500 CE, about 3,000 years of combat. It's pretty ambitious, right? So Xerxes, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Saladin, and William Wallace, right? So lots of things going on here. Game complexity, the kind of medium high, and solitaire playability is low on this one. It does come with wooden cubes, a mounted game board, some plastic stand, scenario book, cards like that. Let's get into it. So I already have cut this because I hate seeing people struggle with getting the shrink wrap open on an unboxing. So let's go ahead and tear that off of there. And let's go ahead and flip this around and see what's in there. Okay. So we have our instruction manual. It is 20 pages long. So let's take a quick look here. So I think this probably, like others, will just run through, right? Counter manifest, action cards with melee results on them, variety of units that are in here, all the way up through heavy gunner. So I'm kind of surprised to see some of the early Hungarian gunners of the Hussite Wars. Elephants. I mean, this is kind of like overly ambitious, maybe. I'm going to be really curious to get this on the table and see what it looks like. I mean, we're talking about cannons and like peleys and things like that are going to be in this same box. So unit facing, of course, is going to be something that's in here. Leader casualties, ranged combat. Looks like there's some terrain and elevation type things. Rally, melee combat, army panic, camps and war wagons, and special events that can happen. So lots of good stuff there, and that'll be definitely interesting to look through. So we've got scenario. Now this is volume 1 on it. I've not heard anything about a volume 2 or anything else other than this was kind of a one-off that looked interesting, and it had a whole lot of scenarios in it. So let's take a look at some of these scenarios. So we're up to 279 BCE, Asculum. And this uses the Common Era nomenclature, which I think, of course, historians have sort of adopted, although I think for, you know, just regular salt-of-the-earth folks like me, I don't necessarily know the BCE to BC conversion. I know I'm aware that it's not exactly the same. So now we're into the Crusades, Mongols, and then, as promised, there is the scenario that features William Wallace, I guess, with Falkirk. So that's kind of fun. All right, we have a CRT here. I think we got probably 2 of those, right? Sure, 2 CRTs, and wow, it looks like these are relative attacking unit to defending unit. You get positive shifts and negative shifts, and then you've got action cards, so a couple of different summaries on here. These are all really actually quite nice quality. So we've got what I love to see, and honestly, we're at a point now where I just don't necessarily have time to screw around with getting stuff out and clipping corners and stuff like that. I realize the economics of it kind of demand that it work that way, but if I can get a counter sheet like this, I'm far more likely to buy the game than not. So with the blue 4 and the red 4 in here, I see we're going to have multiple. These look like they're like roughly the same layout. So when you get a blue out and you get the corresponding red, it's like basically the exact same set of counters on there. And these are pretty nice. Oops, I'll pop that guy out. Let's take a quicker look here and see what you think. So these are quite nice. Okay. This must be the mounted board. This thing is massive. Holy cow. There we go. Oh, okay, so we've got a nice tray inside of here, but the board is just enormous. Let's look at this thing. So we're gonna move some things out of the way here and take a look at this. Well, let's take a look at this board. All right, so we'll do kind of a scroller here. So on this end, what's interesting is this is not bound, which makes me wonder if you can jam 2 copies of this thing together and play like, you know, quote unquote epic size scenarios. I suspect there's probably something in there about that. And as we come down across the battlefield, this is kind of the center hex. I think this is used for scatter and things like that. And let's fold this as we go. What I don't like is that I've got some damage on my board here that looks like it was from the manufacturer when they packed it. So there's kind of, not that big of a deal, but it's definitely really noticeable for an otherwise flawless looking board. The terrain texture is not great on this, but it's not about that, it's about the game itself, so that doesn't bother me too much. And then we have kind of the onboard tracking, so Army Panic tracking, sequence of play, combat modifiers, and then of course your turn tracking. It looks like there's some maybe variable game length with the dice on here. Elephant effect table, unit size and movement effects. So this is quite nice. Some reminders about facing and that sort of thing as well. So nice map. Let's bring back in the tray that goes in the bottom. So there are some red and yellow wooden cubes, some standees, although I'm not entirely sure what those are for. Baggies. Wouldn't be a war game without baggies, right? And people say like, oh, the war game's got to have a CRT and hex and counter. Honestly, you throw these things in there, a lot of times it feels like a war game. And then we've got 2 decks of cards here. Let's crack one of these open and take a peek at it. All right. So these cards have, and let's zoom in maybe just a hair. Okay. And so these cards have kind of a command rating, melee results, a die roll on the bottom. You'll notice there are no dice that come in this, so these are the dice. And then some sort of like event that comes with it. These are linen coated cards. I don't know if you can see the texture on it. Yeah, you can kind of see the texture of it. They're nice thickness. And then there are symbols on them as well for things that happen, and then dice colors. So I've noticed there's a red, a gray, white, and I think there's a blue. Yeah, and a blue. So, I don't know, there's a whole slew of these things. It looks like maybe there's, I don't know, 65, 80 cards, something like that for each of these decks. So the blue deck and a red deck, it must mean that those are player-based. This was Kickstarter, and with the Kickstarter, there was an additional kind of stretch goal, and with the stretch goal came some additional scenarios. So let's look at that. So the stretch goal was this, which were another Falkirk hat, and I think some of these we saw already inside of the scenario book. So that's interesting. That we'll have to see if these are duplicates of what's already in the scenario book or if they're different in some way. Let's take a look at this Falkirk scenario, since that one we've noted before. Let's take a quick peek here. So we've got the Falkirk scenario. If we put these side by side, they are exactly the same. So they're basically just setup cards of a small summary of what's already printed inside of your scenario book, and they have the same special rules, it looks like. Yeah, these just look like a convenience versus having to pull the scenario book out. Instead of that, you can just use the scenario card. I'll show you side by side here. So I'm not entirely sure what the basis of that was, other than you go from 2 pages down to a 1-page format. It sort of makes me wonder why this had to have a 2-page format with all sorts of like blank space, when clearly the data was presented just fine in a 1-page format. I mean, there's some additional flavor text about the background of the battle, but it's not enough flavor text where I would say it's important for the understanding of the scenario, or something that somebody couldn't go look up and find something more interesting and better elsewhere. So as far as Kickstarter stretch goals go, kind of disappointing. And also, it's a stretch goal that sort of looks like they didn't do a great job of planning the product itself, when clearly you can put everything in the scenario book on these cards, which would have made it easier to do updates and scenario packs and stuff like that, rather than maybe just having a book. So a little confused by exactly why that decision was made, but otherwise a nice package. We'll definitely get to this game at some point, not this week, but in the future, and certainly an interesting mix of components that go along with it, and we'll take more time with this one in the future. Thanks for watching.